Ringapakia. Waiwatakahiya. Makamata Matakorako. Arakamata Matakorako. Aratenete tangata pupuru pupuru nana itiki mai pakapititera. Wahupane, wahupane, wahupane kopane pititera. Wakamateka Matakorako. Kamateka Matakorako. Aratenete tangata pupuru pupuru nana.
Hello and welcome to my video presentation of New Zealand English. My name is Tone-Lise Carlsen and I am a 43 years old teacher from Nordreisa in Northern Norway. And in this little video I am going to try to describe New Zealand English and compare some of its linguistic features to more standard English, British received pronunciation and general American. First, I'm going to talk a little bit about the background and history of New Zealand English. Next, a little bit about linguistic features, pronunciation, tone, vocabulary, and grammar. And I will end with speaking a bit about whether New Zealand English and other varieties of English is valuable for students to meet in school, and what does LK20, the curricula in Norway, say about this? English became the dominant language in New Zealand in the second half of the 1800s. But one surprising fact is that technically it's not an official language of New Zealand. English is a de facto official language, and that's because it's so dominant that it hasn't needed to be protected by law. So while Maori and New Zealand Sign Language are official languages legally, there is no legal paper stating English as an official language. It is used so much and by so many people, so it's always included as an official language of the country and may be used in any or all public or official contexts. Let's take a brief look at the history and background of New Zealand English, or Kiwi English as it is sometimes called. Between 1788 and 1841, New Zealand was loosely part of the colony of New South Wales, which later became part of Australia. And the earliest European settlers in New Zealand were traders and whalers from New South Wales who set up trading stations. They were later followed by missionaries from England at the beginning of the 1814. An early Kiwi accent started to appear in the late 1800s, especially in towns with a mix of immigrant populations and accents. The colony of New Zealand was declared as a separate entity in 1841, and Britain began to carry out the process of planned settlement. Most immigrants came from England, Wales, Scotland, and Ireland, but many did not come directly. A significant number arrived from Australia, so some of them likely brought their children who had been born in Australia. And this could have had an effect on the way other children in the colony spoke and influenced the emerging New Zealand accent. Children of settlers born in the 1850s and 1860s usually had an accent similar to their parents, but the children born in the 1870s and 1880s had the new Kiwi accent that was developing. A likely influence for this was that free education started in New Zealand in 1877. So one could say that the classroom became a big melting pot of a lot of different accents. Important to note is that the indigenous people, the Maori people of New Zealand who lived there before the settlement, also had their own languages. There was Te Reo Maori and Te Re Moriori, and the last one is listed as extinct today. And Kiwi English has also influences from the Maori languages, which I will come back to later. Pronunciation in Kiwi English. Here in Nordreisa we have a special and cozy little cafe called Hills Cafe. It is owned by Robert Hill from New Zealand, who met the love of his life, Annette from Nordreisa, and they run this cafe together. They got married and have 2 small girls, and he will help me out with describing the pronunciation in Kiwi English. First of all, let's talk about vowels. The main thing that distinguishes the New Zealand English from Australian English and other varieties is its vowels. And according to Svartvik and Leach, some of them shifted during the 20th century. Most strikingly, the original short front vowels shifted, and this is called the Southern Hemisphere change shift. And these changes are more pronounced in broad accents in New Zealand and led to some interesting contrasts. The shift in Kiwi vowels was a chain shift, meaning the first vowel began to sound like the second one, and the second one then began to sound like the third one. So the vowel A became E became I, and I became Ö or I. So as illustrated, pat became pet, pet became pid, and pid became put or peat. Now let us listen to how Rob pronounces the words pan and hand in New Zealand accent.
Pan hand.
Here we clearly can hear that his A sound is pan hand. However, the long vowels remains the same as in Britain and received pronunciation.
Bath, path, pass, laugh, castle, shaft, father.
Next up is the to I sound, and we'll use the word pan, egg, and breakfast.
Pen. I'd like an egg for breakfast.
If I were to exaggerate here, it almost sounds like he's saying pin. I'd like an egg for breakfast. And now the last vowel, the I to Ö. We use the word kid, stick, and fish and chips, because there's an old joke saying that Australians, they eat fish and chips, and New Zealanders, they eat fish and chips. Let's hear how Rob says it.
Kid, stick, fish and chips.
Well, personally, I can't hear a difference when he says kid and stick, but I can hear clearly that he says fish and chips.
Kid, stick, fish and chips.
This could, of course, lead to some misunderstanding, and Svartvik and Leach refers to an example of an American who tries to phone his New Zealand friend, and the phone is answered by the friend's daughter. And when he asked to speak to her father, he thought she replied, "He's dead." And after his momentary shock, he realized that she was actually saying, "Here's Dad." So listen to Rob when he tries to explain he likes to play the saxophone.
I enjoy playing the sax. I enjoy playing the sax.
So New Zealand accent can generally be described as non-rhotic, meaning that the R is not pronounced at the end of a syllable and instead rendered as a vowel. For example, I say beer, but a Kiwi would say beer. While there are different Kiwi accents based on social and economic factors, for the most part there aren't regional variation. But an exception is the regional accent of the south of New Zealand, the Southland, and part of Otago, where more than half of the original settlers were from Scotland. And Kiwis of Maori background can sometimes pronounce the trilling R sound like the Southland accent. So they say R, as in burger. Let's hear how Rob says the word hard, speaker, and butter.
Hard, speaker, butter.
The diphthong in words like air, chair, and hair is closer and sounds like ear rather than RP air. So pairs such as air and ear, bear and beer often sound alike. Let's hear an example.
Air, bear, beer, chair, Here, here. Really, really.
The last feature I'd like to mention is intonation. In Kiwi accents, declarative utterances often have a rising instead of a falling intonation, and this high rising terminal can also be found in Australian accents and some varieties of American accents. It can sound as if a speaker is asking a question instead of making a statement. So a conversation could sound like this. What you doing? I'm making food for the baby. And this feature is increasingly heard in British accents and is, according to Galloway and Rose, most common among young people and especially young women. Well, Rob is neither a teenager nor a woman, but let's hear his intonation when reading a pre-written short text.
During the weekends, I like to go out of the house, to go to the mountains, do some tramping, or go to the beach with my family, that sort of thing.
Well, in an uninspired pre-written text, we can't really hear Rob's intonation, but try to hear the difference when his wife Annette is speaking about her children. And notice the high-rise terminal when she speaks.
Sorry, but this take is gonna be while rocking because I have a baby with a bit of tummy ache. I hope you can still hear me. Pupils do sometimes comment on my accent, but mostly after I've told them that I used to live in New Zealand. They then sometimes have questions about whether that's where my accent's from. Yeah.
So Annette, she's a young woman, and Galloway and Rose's suggestion suits her perfectly. We can clearly hear that when she speaks spontaneously, she has a high-rising terminal. Over to vocabulary and grammar of New Zealand English. And as mentioned, New Zealand English was influenced by the settlers and immigrants who came to its shores, but it's primarily influenced by British English, but has also been shaped over time by the Maori culture and other immigrant languages. And this is resulting in some distinct grammatical features and vocabulary. So loan words from Maori are definitely one of the most notable elements of the English of New Zealand. And when the settlers arrived and wondered about new unknown objects and phenomena, they learned the Maori words and terms for them. So New Zealand English have borrowed Maori words for names of flora and fauna, and according to Bauer, newcomers would typically ask for words for the unfamiliar phenomena surrounding them. And in particular, flora, fauna, and the artifacts and practices of the Maoris themselves. Some Maori words are optionally used instead of an English word. For example, Maori greeting kia ora. This is quite widely used, and it means hello or thank you, but literally it means be healthy. And kiwi also comes from Maori, and it refers to the kiwi bird. But it's also the name of a fruit and the nickname for New Zealanders. And we have pakarood. This word means broken. The car is pakarood. Comes from the Maori word pakaru. Mana. This means a person or an organization of great prestige, and it comes from the Maori word mana, meaning prestige, authority, or its source, spiritual power. And last one, hui. This means a party or a meeting. We're holding a hui tomorrow morning. Part of the vocabulary in New Zealand is slang words and expressions. And we can see that some of these expressions are also used in Australia and in some cases in the UK or Ireland where they originated. Some examples could be the words scattered, heaps, sweet as, it's hot as naked buggered, and this looks a bit sus. Despite crossover between Kiwi and Australian English, other words and expressions are uniquely Kiwi. For example, the word choice, which means great, awesome. And Rob was talking about going to his bach, which is a kind of a cottage or holiday home. Whoop whoops means the middle of nowhere, and you go tramping when you go hiking. Gumboots is also called Wellingtons in other countries, so shoes for rainy days. Another common feature is abbreviations, and Galloway and Rose points to a common feature in Australian and New Zealand English: lexical shortening and the addition of the famous O and E suffixes. And then you can find words like telly for television, Chrissy presents, Barbie for barbecue. But in New Zealand you have a smoko, which means a brake. A forky is a man or a woman who drives a forklift. You have a compo, which means compensation. And this happens to place names as well. You have Queenie for Queensland and Oaks for Oakland, for example. So why do we incorporate the teaching of foreign languages in our educational system in Norway? And what motivates students to learn a language other than their mother tongue? The primary purpose of learning a language is to foster the opportunity for individuals to connect and to communicate, to get to know each other, to comprehend one another. And I think that as social human beings, we rely on relationships with others. And within the communication section of the core elements outlined in the Norwegian curriculum LK20, it's explicitly mentioned that the English subject should provide students with the means to express themselves and engage in authentic and practical situations. And actually, throughout the entirety of LK20, the English curricula, the term English-speaking world is consistently employed, as opposed to specifying British or American English. Various English language variations have evolved worldwide, and English functions as a lingua franca to an ever-increasing degree. And it is also the prevailing international language in the business world. So I think that in the course of their lives, today students are bound to encounter diverse accents and language variations. They will meet hundreds of people. And as teachers, it's our duty to teach them about these variations, how to respect and comprehend them, as knowledge serves as a bulwark against prejudice. Here you can see some of the competence aims for year 10. I picked out 6 of them in the English curricula, which explicitly deals with different variants of English or learning about the English-speaking world or different variants of the English language. Well, we are now close to the end of this video, but I'd like to say that I think it is both important and wise to show pupils that there are different variations and accents of English, simply because it can tell you a lot about a person, where he or she is from, and also the fact that different Englishes will sometimes employ distinct words for the same objects or the same concepts. So acquiring knowledge of various English variations, whether through school and educational means or exposure to social media or different newspapers, books, it really serves to enrich students' understanding and perhaps foster respect for diversity, and could also develop empathetic skills, which is important. And I think it's vital for us teachers to keep in mind that we are preparing students for life in an increasingly multicultural or intercultural world. So that was it and the end of this video. Thank you very much for watching, and here are my references.